All right. Well, welcome back to the HR Issue podcast. We're here for a very special episode of the HR Issue. Season 1 is somehow behind us. And actually, we thought we'd record a really special episode today. Just have a bit of a recap. What did we talk about Season 1? What were the key points that we loved? And actually, I'm not alone today. I'm joined by a powerhouse in the HR world. And she's laughing because she hates it and she gets very cringy by it. If I had people to clap, I'd say, let's give Nebel Crowhurst a round of applause.
Thank you.
You can clap yourself if you like.
Thank you, I won't, but thank
Nebel,
you.
for those who don't know you, because I know you won't say this, I will say it. You are a vastly experienced Chief People Officer. You've been on HR's most influential list multiple times. How many times?
4, I think.
Just the four. Just the four. And you've worked in some of the biggest brands in the world. And I'm so happy you've joined us today because I know the topic of Season 1 was something that you're particularly passionate about as well. We talked all around well-being.
Yeah.
So one of the things I was asking everyone on Season 1 as a bit of an opener really is well-being means a lot of things to a lot of people. What does well-being mean to you?
Yeah, it was a great series 1. I really enjoyed listening to all of the episodes. Some brilliant guests. Some great questions asked by you. So well-being for me is very much about how organisations enable people to thrive in the workplace. But that feels probably a little bit too broad and is easy to be overlooked because we need to think that well-being is actually really a strategic imperative. So the world that we're working in today is more and more challenging, more and more complex. We're certainly more aware as business leaders and within organisations of the importance of supporting people from their mental health, physical health, emotional and in fact financial health, because the more we do so, the more resilient and able our workforce is to be able to do a good job. So essentially, whilst it's about enabling people to thrive, it's really a strategic imperative that enables businesses to be successful. I think organisations have a responsibility to think about how they support their people's well-being and being aware of what their workforce demographic looks like so that they put in place the right type of well-being solutions for their people. So one size doesn't fit all. We need to use data and insights to understand what our workforce is made up of and meet those needs to enable people to do their best work.
Love it. So I couldn't have said it better myself. I think that bit around understanding the data, understanding your workforce is common sense, really, when you say it out loud, but perhaps we don't do it as often. What I think is really key is that one size fits all thing, right? It's impossible. In this day and age, with so many people, so many different types of ways of working, different levels of technology access, whatever, different business contexts, trying to do one thing in one way is almost impossible. And actually, throughout Season 1, we talked about various different types of well-being. So perhaps that's a good place to start.
Yeah.
Because I'm intrigued to hear your view on the different types of well-being and maybe some experiences you've had. We were joined in episode 1, this feels like a long time ago, by the wonderful Michelle Hartley.
Yeah.
Who's full of energy, is all about social connection, collaboration. And that was the theme of that episode, is social well-being.
Yeah.
And we kind of touched a little bit on things like hybrid working, which is a topic that never seems to go away, where people work, how they work. And we were talking, and Michelle was talking about that we've got to understand the person, right? We've got to understand what the person needs, but also we've got to understand what the business needs. What's your thoughts on that, the whole hybrid working piece? I know you've got some opinions on it, so maybe share some with us.
Yeah, for sure. So I think what's important to consider is we think about well-being as a strand perhaps of our overall people strategy. We also then in good organisations are looking at the concept of D&I and creating diverse and inclusive organisations. And for me, what the key undertone of that is belonging. And so creating environments where people feel that they can truly show up as their true authentic selves and feel like they belong in the organisation. And so the things that you put in place in terms of parameters around things like hybrid working, ways of working, the types of policies and benefits that you have in place are all about enabling people to feel like they belong and to foster environments that have good levels of D&I across the business. That all feeds into well-being. They're not separate things. They're intrinsically linked. So I think it's really important. Again, you look at your demographic of your organisation and the type of work that's happening in your business to understand what the right plan is around whether you're remote first or hybrid, whether a mandate or not is the right thing to do. Certainly not in my viewpoint do I feel a mandate is the right thing to do, but certain roles require you to be in person. That's how it is. But flexibility comes in many, many forms. Businesses need to think smarter. I don't think it's black and white. And again, I don't think there's a single solution for what every organisation should do. But you should look at, where there are positive and negative impacts on your workforce, depending on what type of policy you have in place for flexible or hybrid working, to encourage that inclusivity, to enable that breadth of talent to join your business and not close it off because you have parameters in place that perhaps mean that, working parents can't join your business because they need the flexibility, or people that have caring responsibilities.
Yeah, love that. So it touches so many different points there in terms of business imperative, the context, but DE&I, inclusivity, accessibility, so on and so forth. I know you've built a lot of your HR career about being very passionate about collaboration, working together.
Yeah.
So what about that element of social connection? How important do you think it is in this world? The world is mad at the best of times, that people feel like they can be connected to other human beings.
Yeah, well, it goes back to this point on belonging, doesn't it? So innately as human beings, we have emotions and we need to feel connected to people. I think this is where, we're in an interesting junction in society with everything that's going on with technology and what that then means in terms of how we show up as human beings in the workplace. But innately, we are humans and we want to feel like we've got that connection with others. So this is why I say we need to think smart about how we put in place the right parameters for people to be able to work. So whilst I'm not a fan of mandating, I am a fan of doing things in person, very much so. In fact, over the last few months, I've realised that doing too much online, for me personally, doesn't make me be my best self. So I'm trying to do what I can to adjust the work that I'm doing so that when I've got a choice between a virtual coffee catch up or an in-person, and that's where this is really great. We're sat here in person doing this podcast. And so often in the past, I've done things like this and we do it via a virtual screen, which is great. And it means it's more accessible if you're dealing with things globally, but where I've got the opportunity to do something in person, I'll do so. Because I think the human connection that you get through doing something in person is so much more powerful.
Difficult to replicate on a screen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's all about flexibility, I suppose. The second episode was all around financial well-being.
Yeah.
So we were joined by Phoebe Matthews. She works for an organization called Nudge, who specialize in financial education. And I guess one of the interesting things for me from listening to Phoebe talk, she was talking about, protecting yourself financially now, but also setting yourself up for the future. So how do you look after your future self and make smart decisions now that will stand you in good stead for the future? But one of the things that definitely stood out for me was it still feels a bit awkward in the mid-2020s talking about money.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Maybe societally we're all different. It's certainly a very British thing to feel uncomfortable to talk about money, in terms of the way we are as people in our nation. I think there's two parts to this. Is the conversation about money, or is the conversation more about financial health and well-being? So if we shift and focus more about supporting people in terms of their education and knowledge, I think the reality is the things that we learn through school and through education are not necessarily the things that we need to know as adults around finances. So certainly I always very open, not traditionally academic, didn't necessarily find the school environment the most useful. And I think we need to do more practical learning within schools to help prepare people for the future. And by doing so, we shift the narrative around how people feel about talking about money as they move into the workplace and as they become adults. But I think if we focus more so on how do we help people to feel comfortable to say, I don't know how to understand what goes into a mortgage application. I don't know what a credit card means for me in terms of positive versus negatives, and the consequences if I don't pay back on a monthly payment that I need to pay back on. So it's this kind of concept of financial literacy, people understanding what money means and how they handle it and how they manage it and how they make those good decisions for the future. And what's most important from a well-being point of view is that the biggest driver of mental health issues are linked to financial issues and money. So the more we can enable people to feel comfortable to be able to have those conversations, to say, actually, I could do with some help on this. Does anyone know where I can find this information? So organisations like Nudge are doing a really great job of helping that financial education happen within businesses, and also focusing on where you are at in your life at any given time. whilst, it's important that we're making retirement decisions as early as possible, really in your early 20s, are you paying enough attention to that? Probably not. You're probably thinking more so about how I get my foot on the ladder in terms of buying a home. So prioritising what financial education information goes to your employees at the right time, at the point that they need it, I think makes it much more useful and powerful. But shifting that narrative so people feel comfortable to say, I'm a bit confused actually, I don't know how to understand this. Can anyone help? I think is really important. Whether we move the dial as much as we'd like to for people to feel completely open about their financial circumstances, that's probably going to take us a bit of time societally.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, I'm 38 at the time of recording this. I feel like I'm getting on a bit. I still don't understand pensions. I mean, doesn't matter how many times people explain it to me, how they work, where the money goes. I have no idea. I will just assume it'll all be there when I hit retirement, whatever age that'll be. But I literally have no idea. So the things like that, or investing, or mortgages, or credit cards, all these types of things that I'm sure are just confusing the life out of people.
Yeah.
But I think your point is a really valid one in terms of different people are at different stages of life, and different things are happening to different people at different times. So it's important that they are educated on the things that matter to them the most. So again, one size doesn't fit all. Maybe this is a theme for this whole well-being piece, for sure.
And also, in the current world that we live in terms of cost of living crisis, the more we can do to help people to work out how to make their money go as far as possible, so important. And we're not all born with the skills of being able to manage finances effectively. Some people do it better than others. So if we can help employees manage their finances effectively, that takes away that stress and anxiety around money, which contributes to then mental health issues. So if we can reduce that, then all the better for everybody all round.
Nice. Yeah. All right. Well, episode 3, we were joined by an actual doctor, so Dr. Rebecca Lawrence. And when I spoke to Rebecca before she came in to record, she was actually dialing in from A&E. So she was in her scrubs. She was preparing to go and do whatever she does on a normal shift. So that blows my mind in itself. But she kindly joined us and she was talking about physical well-being.
Yeah.
The importance of looking after ourselves from a physical perspective to get the best out of our brains and our mental energy and all that sort of stuff. So on this concept of physical well-being, maybe that's probably what well-being used to be seen as. We'll give you a discounted gym membership or something like that. But actually, there's something to it, isn't there, in terms of looking after the machine and making sure we're at the best we can be. What are your thoughts on that? How important is it that organizations help people physically be the best versions of themselves?
Yeah, I'm clearly no doctor, so she would have had much more stronger insight on that. But certainly, if you look at the evolution of workplace well-being, I think the initial focus was, we're employers, we need to do things to help people get moving, and focusing on physical support to begin with. And that then evolved very much into realising that we needed to think about mental health, and then further and beyond into emotional and financial support. So the physical well-being piece is interesting because I feel like also there was a big spike in understanding the need for movement through COVID. Much as I like to avoid that topic, it's a reality of a period of time that had a huge impact on us all globally. And that's where organisations that had started to do some work around wellbeing, probably in the physical space, then ramped it up during COVID because there was the encouragement of going out for your daily walk, doing online kind of yoga classes, that sort of thing, and helping people to have access to online resources that encourage them to move and get out of the house when we were able to. In the short periods of time we were allowed a little bit of freedom and fresh air. But there's such a direct link between physical and mental health also. So those kind of positive hormones that we get when we exercise, and how that then makes us feel overall when you, like you say, you think about our whole bodies. Making sure that physical well-being and physical health stays part of our overall well-being strategy is still really important. But I think we've moved even further beyond that in understanding we need to look at well-being holistically. So we've moved beyond a fruit bowl in the office and a yoga class at lunchtime. It's so much broader than that in terms of overall well-being. But how we move physically, the types of things we do to look after our bodies from a nutrition perspective as well as exercise, absolutely paramount, because that all feeds then how we feel.
Yeah, and I'm having flashbacks of COVID and walking around the park once a day.
Yeah.
I've never seen so many people out walking, actually.
Yeah.
And that's what everyone did. But then as life does, it moves back and people are probably a little bit more chained to their desks, perhaps, than they used to be, or certainly during COVID anyway. One of the things Rebecca talked about, and something that's very passionate to her, and I think probably something resonates with you here. She talks a lot about yoga and meditation and how that works for her, and breath work and all that type of thing. I know it's something that you're a fan of. So why does that stuff matter to you, and what difference do you think it makes to your well-being, focusing on things like meditation, breath work, yoga?
Yeah. So we're all different. We're all unique. I would consider myself as someone that's got a very busy mind.
Okay.
Never stops, awake or asleep. So I've found over the years what yoga does for me, rather than it being something about my physical movement, it's a case of me being able to still my mind. And so that's my point around that connection between physical and mental health. So certainly slowing down your breath and calming yourself when you're in moments of anxiety have a really positive impact. And yoga does that, as well as meditation and mindfulness. They're all things that I find very useful to kind of just slow me down. Because I'm one of those people that will be very fast paced, move from one thing to the next, thinking about 100 things at the same time. You've got your work mind, then you've got the kind of mental load of life in general, thinking about all the other things that you need to think about as a grown adult. So I find yoga is less about the movement that I experience, whilst that's lovely and I do benefit from it. Actually what it does to my mindset whilst I'm experiencing a yoga or mindful meditation is hugely beneficial to me. And then it's beneficial to those around me, because if I'm a better version of myself, whether that's me as the person at home amongst my family, or me as the leader in a business working with my team, or with the leadership team, I'm doing a better job. And it's really important that I do the best job that I can do, because of my job being about people.
Yep, makes perfect sense. On episode 4, we were joined by Kimberly Wilson. So Kimberly is a best-selling author, and she specializes in the link between nutrition, so I guess what we put into the machine, and brain health and mental health.
Yeah.
And I learned so much from that. I mean, if there was a topic that I'm perhaps less informed on, it's definitely about that, because we've known each other a long time. And, my eating habits are a little bit...
Unique.
Unique is a good one. I know what I like and I stick to it all the time. But she was talking about, powering the brain through the right types of food, and the impact that could have on your ability to focus and your ability to be productive and all that sort of stuff. What are your thoughts on that? Does that make sense to you? Is it true?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. And it's something, same goes. I feel like it's an area I'm still learning. So maybe it's as you get older, I don't know, you try and think to yourself, okay, what am I doing to myself and my body that's going to help me have a healthy, long life? And certainly what we eat and the impact it has. Happy to share from a personal point of view. So quite some years ago, I cut certain food groups out of my diary because it was impacting my skin. So you don't automatically think that what you eat will have a direct impact on the outside of your body, but it does. And so the same goes with what you eat and then how it impacts how you think. I'm sure we've had lots of situations where we've kind of eaten terribly, eating the wrong things, and you kind of get to that point where you're feeling sluggish and slow, and it's not great. And then you sort of say, well, okay, let's rethink this. Let's go on we probably think about it as a bit of a health kick, and you try and put in place new habits. But I think if we can do more to have sustainable habits longer term to help us eat more thoughtfully and mindfully, I think it's really good for us overall. So it's an area for me I'm still learning, and I try and think about the impacts that the food I'm eating have on how I'm behaving and how I feel. But we're also human, and we enjoy a little snacky treat.
Little snack, yeah. Little Domino's every now and again, or a couple of times a week. Definitely an area I'm still learning. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, definitely an area I'm still learning about for sure. But episode 5 was we were joined by Dr. Jo Burrell. So Jo has done a lot of research recently alongside her business partner, Dr. Felicity Baker, in the world of HR well-being. So not the typical well-being, social, nutritional, whatever, but actually in the well-being of us as professionals. And her research is quite alarming, and she shared a lot of this in terms of, how the profession is feeling right now in terms of anxiety, depressive symptoms, stress, burnout, so on and so forth. What are your thoughts on that? Do you see that? Are you experiencing that? Have you experienced that yourself in terms of the workload of HR, feeling like it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger?
Yeah, I think the work that Dr. Jo and Dr. Felicity are doing at the moment is fascinating. Certainly the expectations on HR and what we do today versus what we did 10 years ago, 20 years ago and beyond has broadened significantly. I don't necessarily see that as a negative. I think it's a demonstration of how valuable we are in the organisation. But if we're going to take on more, we've got to make sure we're resourced correctly and we've got the right kind of support for us to be able to do so. And so listening to some of the research that's coming out of their work is really interesting in that more and more people are feeling overstretched, and the demands are getting greater. So this concept of, how we support people in how they work through challenges in HR, and taking the idea of supervision, which comes from their background in clinical psychology, I think is one that's worth exploring. I think what's fascinating for me is, again, dependent on the context of the organisation and the type of HR team you are. If you're a standalone person in a smaller business, you've got very limited support wrapped around you. And so the idea of supervision and external support coming from people like Dr. Joe and Dr. Felicity, I think is probably very useful. When I listen to some of the work that they're doing, I also then wonder where we need to do more internally with our HR leadership. So I'd like to think in my career, I've done the best that I could do to be there for the people in my teams within HR when we're facing really challenging, difficult moments. But that's something I've had to just develop and grow and nurture myself and be mindful of, knowing that part of my role as a HR leader is that I need to support my team through some of these difficult moments. And I'm wondering whether the work that they're doing starts to evolve more into, rather than having this concept of supervision coming from externally, how we equip HR leaders as they build and grow through their HR career, that they've got that skill set within the team, rather than having to go externally. So making sure that you've got the right infrastructure and ecosystem around you as a function will only strengthen us for the future. That said, it's not always the same in every business. Not every business has the luxury of a wider team that you can lean on and have these sort of supervised conversations. And I also respect the fact that the concept of supervision is a specific skill. It's not that I'm saying that within HR we can just pick that up and do that. I know that it's something that is properly studied and you need to be qualified to do so. But I think some of the principles really make sense, and how we bring that to life within our own HR teams I think is really, really important. But the work they're doing is fantastic.
Yeah, I think that concept of leadership broadly when it comes to well-being is obviously going to be a hot topic of conversation, right? So we talk a lot, and you've talked a lot in the past about emotional intelligence and being self-aware of the impact that you're having on people around you. So whether that's, and we always talk about it in the concept of our leaders that we work with, but you're spot on in terms of HR leadership across the board. Do we need to develop our skills even further to recognize that actually HR list just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger? The more interesting and complex topics which perhaps never existed before in terms of either law or the human aspect of what we do, or the financial aspect of what we're doing, or the strategy aspect of what we're doing. So there's just so much more, but without the proper support wrapped around it, to your point, it might feel a bit lonely at times, or it might feel a bit overwhelming, and that's obviously not great for any of us. Well, that's season one. Season one was all around employee well-being, and it's a real canter through so many different topics. I've loved all of the conversations I've had with some really expert guests, this one included. But that's not all. So season one, of course, has to be followed by season two. And actually, there's something particularly interesting happening with season two. So I'm putting down the microphone and I'm handing over the microphone and hosting duties, the hosting seat, to you, Nebel. So why don't you tell our listeners and our viewers a little bit about what to expect on season two?
Fabulous. Yeah, thank you. So I'm picking up the mic and I get to be your host for season two, and we've got a really fantastic lineup of guests joining me. So I'm really looking forward to being able to share who they are and the different editions and episodes that we start to publish. So slightly different focus from wellbeing, with a variety of different topics that we're going to be covering. So first up, we're going to be looking at employee value proposition. So the idea of EVP, one that gets talked about quite a bit in our HR space, but are we getting it right? And how do we need to evolve our EVP for the future as the workplace environment continues to change and demands of employees continue to evolve? So I'm really looking forward to that. And some top tips from a fantastic speaker on that episode about creating a winning EVP. We'll also be talking about the hot topic, which we can't escape, which is AI. So in every conversation, there is something around AI and how we work and what AI looks like for HR and the way in which we work for the future. So again, another brilliant speaker that will be joining me and sharing their insights on how AI enables us to evolve, not only in HR, but within our organisations, and how we get that balance right between leveraging technology, but also continuing to be as human as we possibly can be, not forgetting the fact that we are still human beings at the heart of everything that we do. We'll be moving on then to think about employee voice. So I love this topic. I talk a lot about employee voice and the use of insights and data to inform how we prioritise when we design our people strategies. So we've got a real expert coming in to join me to talk about employee voice and how we utilise the information that can come from our people and truly listen and respond and react to that. And what the future looks like around things like employee engagement surveys and how we evolve away from the annual or biannual survey into a way that helps us to get a much more regular kind of drumbeat of information from our people. We're also going to be thinking about kind of personal journeys. So we have mentioned already today that it's important that we recognise people uniquely and we look at our workforces around solutions when it comes to well-being, but we also need to think about what are the journeys that our employees are going on and what do we need to put in place to be able to support them. So for example, when people are taking career breaks for family time or changes in career, what are the things that need to be established so that people can still continue to be successful in their career and not slowed down. And we've actually got 2 people joining me for that conversation, so that's going to be an interesting one. And we're also going to be doing a special episode on the Employment Rights Bill. So as important as everything else, we have to get our foundations right in HR. So whilst it's amazing that we can talk about things like D&I and well-being and creating great personalised employee experiences, if we don't get the foundations right and we don't understand the law fully and we don't get ahead of the curve with the changes that are coming our way, then we're going to be in a poor position. So we need to think about that. And then finally, we've got an episode focused specifically on DE&I and a really fascinating speaker joining me for that, where we'll be talking about how we create really deeply inclusive and diverse organisations that foster belonging. So a big lineup with some really well-known faces that are going to bring some interesting insights. I know I'm going to learn a lot from the conversations as much as all the listeners are going to be able to learn a lot from the conversations. So I am really looking forward to getting into series 2. Grabbing hold of the mic. Thanks for handing it over, Chris, and I'll look forward to seeing everybody over the next few episodes.